Good morning, everyone. You can see this is a luxury sector. The entire panel is wearing ties. It's from a different era. I'd like to introduce my panel. We'll go left to right. First of all, Stephen Webster, who's the head asset manager for KAFD. Next, Imran Changezi, who's the development director for the Diriyah Gate community. Then we have two operators side, Jaidev Menezes right here, who is the mixed-use vice president for Marriott for the Middle East and the region. And then Daniel, his counterpart. These two, I think, lead the sector in the region, definitely in projects, with a slightly more glamorous title, with Accor, One Living. As we start off, I think let me have each of you give a 30-second summary of some of the projects you're doing either in the kingdom or in the region that are in your expertise. Start with you, Jaidev.
Sure. Great to be here. As background, Marriott's the world's largest branded residential company. We have 15 amazing luxury and premium brands, including the Ritz-Carlton, St. Regis, Edition, W. We have 230 projects globally. About 120 that are open and 110 that are in the pipeline. We have branded residences we've been doing for the last 25 years, starting off with Ritz-Carlton, and the sector has completely exploded over the last 10 years. We look at co-located projects with hotel and branded residences, as well as standalone branded residences. It's great to be here.
Daniel?
Lovely. Ooh, it's a bit loud. Lovely seeing you all. So Accor has been doing branded residential also for the last 20 years. We have 37 open branded residential projects and 105 in the pipeline. We'll be opening about one branded residential project every 3-4 weeks over the next few years. And currently in the kingdom we have one open one, and we have 8 in the pipeline right now.
Diriyah Gate Company Limited is a world-class, one of the largest cultural and heritage-driven multi-asset type master plans. We're about 5 master plans. Total area spanning between them is about 74 square kilometers. We, among other assets, and I will be biased towards hospitality because that's what I represent, there are about 38 hotels and resorts across that 74 square kilometer of those master plans. But of course, we have got complementing other asset class, including museums, heritage houses, showcasing the proud history and the heritage of the kingdom, as well as some very exciting assets coming along in our DG2, Wadi Safar, Wadi Hanifa as well, but all within the heart of Riyadh.
And Stephen?
King Abdullah Financial District Development and Management Company. So we are also in the center of the city, a little bit of a different offering from Diriyah. But covering all asset classes. So we cover a 1.6 square kilometer core. We have currently about 2.1 million square meters of GFA built. We'll end up with about 3.2 million when we're completely finished. And we cover all asset classes from office, retail, residential, entertainment, and hospitality. I have a previous history in hospitality, so it's where my heart is, and looking forward to discussing a core component of branded residential today with the panel.
Okay. This panel, we welcome questions because everyone knows about branded residences, but people have different understandings of what they are. So if you have any questions about structure, legal, please raise your hand and we'll get you a mic. I mean, the concept of a branded residence, it sounds great. It's a win-win-win. For the developer, there's upfront financing. He gets a sales premium on the sale of the unit. He gets the access to design standards and the brand standards and the prestige to put the brand to his project. For the operator, this is a new gig for them. It's a new service line. And a new customer base to extend their brand. Very good fees from 4 to 6% of the gross sales price of the unit for not a lot of work in the sales process.
No, we disagree on that.
Yes, but
Not at all.
I toned that down.
I agree with you, Scott.
And you have a captive wealthy audience for the ancillary hotel facilities where there's an adjoining hotel. And for a buyer, particularly in developing markets, the assurance of what's promised in the sales packet is going to be built according to spec. They get the brand prestige of living in a branded residence, and they get the access to the hotel amenities as well as the service levels expected of a hotel brand. That sounds great to start off, but over time, the interests of the parties vary. The owner's got his money, he may want to exit. The operator's got his upfront fees, and managing one hotel owner is easy. Managing this hydra of individual owners can be much more difficult. And for the buyer who's bought into this long term, it may not be over that term what was promised. And in fact, the brand may disappear at some point, and there's nothing he can do. So to maintain this alignment over the term, I guess start with you, Daniel and Jaidev. When discussing projects with owners, what things do you tell them to think about early on, and what things do they often overlook? Start. Go ahead. You go. You can go first.
You get the hard
Yes.
questions.
Okay. So one of the things that's often most typically overlooked is how do you deliver the hospitality service? So why do people want a branded residence? It's not just the access to the hotel facilities. People are looking for dedicated residential facilities. If you go back 20 years, it was simply everything was shared with a hotel. Then a lounge crept in, then a residence gym. Now you're looking at projects in the luxury space which have between 600 to 3,000 square meters dedicated residential facilities for the unit owners. So what we really look for and what's critical is what's the back of house space to service the residences, and what's that front of house space of dedicated residential facilities, so that you can really deliver on what you're promising in terms of the core services and the a la carte services that people are buying into. And future proofing. You mentioned what happens if the operator's not there. So naturally, hotels, there is a certain amount of churn. Residences have exceptionally little churn. And for operators like us who've been doing it for more than 2 decades, we have projects where the hotel is no longer under one of our brands, but the residences associations have said, thanks, yes, the other operator who's coming on is great, but we bought into your brand. We would prefer to stay with your brand if you're willing to do that. And we have relationships with our unit owners, and we want to do that. So you can only really do that properly if you've future-proofed from the very beginning and have that space.
When you've got a panoply of brands, how do you fit that to the customer base and rental pool, residential lifestyle, all of those things you factor in?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's one of the, so we offer 15 luxury and premium brands. We go through on a project by project basis. Each brand has its own swim lane, has its own design standards, and we try to keep them as unique as possible. So we look at each project independently. There is no one size fits all when it comes to looking at residential projects. On the flip side, if we were looking at, say, a luxury hotel in the UAE, we would go to the owner and say, here's what the facility criteria and program would need to look like, and that's the operator dictating what the hotel needs to look like. On the residential side, it's actually flipped. So the developer comes to us and says, this is what we want to build. We believe this is the unit mix, here are the sizes, here are the facilities, and we make sure, with the support of a market study, that the project is feasible, the sales pricing and pace to sell out the project is reasonable, and on that basis, then layer on the brand from a design point of view. When it comes to brand positioning, again, if we're looking at a Ritz-Carlton location versus a Marriott location, we would position based on price per square foot, the track record of the developer, past projects, et cetera, and we would run the same kind of deal screen and thought process as we would on.
It's just not price point. I mean, if your potential customer base is more retirees, you wouldn't offer a W. A W is a nightclub with rooms above
Sure.
it.
So a perfect example to localize it is Mecca Medina, right? For us, we do two kinds of branded resi projects. One is a standalone and one is mixed use. In Mecca, Medina, our view is that, at least in the Koh-Haram area, we would want a hotel component because we need to offer a rental program, because the buyers are going to be 95% investment and investor buyers. So we don't want to do a standalone branded residence projects where we can't offer a rental program. We want to do a hotel and a complementary residential component, and through the hotel offer a rental program. So we look at each of those instances quite differently.
Imran, with your project, you've got a dozen or more branded residence projects. How have you, in planning this, in getting the right brand and getting the right mix, rental pools, standalone, how have you addressed that?
I would say I would divide them into three major part of it. First part is what Daniel and Jaidev covered already, which is regarding getting it future-proofing it, getting it right, making sure that asset class of hotel and residence, are they complementing? They are not over-complementing either, because you don't want to have too much dependency either. You have the right swim lanes in there between as well, amenities, dedicated clubhouse, services, features, so that the buyer of the branded residence feels he or she is getting the value for the money, and in a long term, the service and the benefit as well. So all that I would lump into one category, that yes, that's right, that we need to take into account, and we do take into account all of that when we are designing it. Where is it located? Is it adjacent? Is it behind? Is it in the same building? Verticality of it, horizontality of it, where are going to be access points, where is going to be convenient? Is it a separate prestige and service and image for that branded residence to walk in and feel that I am not walking into a sort of a poor cousin of the brand, but I'm actually having my own eliteness protective through that arrival experience, access and concierge and whatnot. So that's all in one point that I would say that yes, we take into that consideration. But I think bigger than that, or more important than that, is the level of preparation that we as DGCL put into play even before we got to our detailed master planning, was the fact that branded residences are not just planned based on, here's a plot, build a branded residence. No, there was a lot of thought process behind that. What's complementing it? What's around it? Where's the non-branded, bigger residential community? Where's the cachet? Where's the retail? Where's F&B? Where the access off the highway, metro? Where is it coming in future? All that was taken into account back in 2018-19 before we actually went to our detailed master planning. So when we went to that, then we rest assured we have complemented that, and to give you the correct count, it's 14 branded residence projects across Diriyah. But again, the keys are only 414 odd keys across those 14 projects. So we are not oversaturating it, we're keeping it limited, we're keeping it to a level where exclusivity is not sort of eaten up by the volume and everything. And then the third element, as I promised that there are three, that often we as developers can overlook as the owners, is getting the right talent on board on our side. So when the counterparts are talking, when their design and technical teams are talking, they're talking to a person who knows he or she has done it before. So we're very proud of the talent that we have in our hospitality design and development team, which also takes care of hotels and branded residences. And probably Daniel and Jaidev both can vouch for it as well, and so as 34 other brands that we deal with, that they're dealing with a worthy counterpart who understands what they're doing and they've done it before.
I mean, that's essential, getting people, especially in the emerging markets, getting people who've done the project before. And the branded residential projects I work on, so often the developers thought, oh, I've got this pre-finance option, and I've got a sales premium, but they really haven't thought it through about who is the customer, shall there be a rental pool, which is a completely different animal than where there's not a rental pool, it's more of a residential community. In our pre-call, Stephen, you were talking in your developing your project in building for the, as you call it, the pivot, because of a number of uncertainties in the kingdom, in the legislation, not just who can be the buyers, potential non-Saudi individuals to buy freehold, which is currently not possible. Also the mixed use rules. We have currently, the law here requires owners associations, but there is talk about that changing to adopt the Dubai model, where the owners association has been removed, and there's a licensed third-party manager that the developer has to hire to manage the common facilities. How do you plan for? You don't even know really who your potential customers are. How do you plan a project? And how do you?
We plan it through the pivot.
Pivot, yes.
So
Explain
I think,
the pivot.
Yeah, I think what my companions have already talked through really shows the breadth or the horizon of what you can do with branded residential. In KAFD, it's a component part of our hospitality asset profile. We have 4,000 hotel keys, and then we have about 2,000 units in the branded residential side throughout the project. So, all of the planning, everything is very important, understanding, how we're going to align those brands. But then also, as Scott has mentioned, some of the unknowns in an emerging and developing market are some of these sort of legal ramifications and also the demographic changes. Since KAFD has opened, even in our standard residential product, I've been pleasantly surprised at the number of sort of young Saudis that have moved into the apartments because they like the mixed-use districts, whether they're single or couple. It's actually achieved a higher percentage than what we'd expected initially, and it's a great thing to see. So the pivots that I've referred to is how can we establish different sort of layers in the branded residential deal with the brands and also with our potential customers. So from our perspective, my first pivot has really been to look at an annual lease of a branded residential building. Between now and as the legislation matures, we may take a few years, lease on an annual basis to the prospective tenants and our population of KAFD, but then that allows us that as the legislation matures to be able to switch from a potential annual lease to maybe a freehold sale or a leasehold sale. And now, the standard, I would say, 80 to 90% of branded residential around the world is really done on an off-plan sale or an intent to sell, which is obviously our intent as well. But because of some of these unknowns, by pre-planning and working these pivots in, you can go from a branded annual lease to a freehold or leasehold sale. And I've even started looking at what does that mean to the rental pool. Instead of doing very, very short term, because in KAFD, we're that central business district, we're a real live, work, play community. That's what we're trying to develop. So I don't want the community to be changing, like an Airbnb every week. I want your neighbor to be the same. I want the community to develop and build that way. So that's very much a focus of KAFD. So we're even looking at some different ways to tweak how the rental pool would work, maybe even forming it more like a REIT where everyone who's invested, maybe they're living there, but maybe it's an investment property, but we take the overall annual revenue and annual leasing to create that community and use it as a way to divvy that up between the investors. So these different pivots help us kind of go over the next 3 to 5 years as things start to develop.
So if I take this, I'm a non-Saudi, and I take a lease, is your lease contract give me, assuming the law changes, an option to buy?
Yes, this is definitely something that we've considered, and actually from some of my previous experience, by having the annual branded leasing up front, as people get used to living there, they enjoy the facilities, especially in a mixed-use district like KAFD, where you can walk downstairs through the Wadi and have restaurants and entertainment and everything else. It's a really great dynamic, and in those kinds of scenarios, in a project like this one, I've seen 40 to 50% of the existing tenants actually becoming the first buyers. So it's a great way to, not have to transition, empty the building out, and do a whole swap over if you decide to do the
But because of the absence of freehold, you don't have the upfront financing benefits that developers do, at least currently. Yep.
Correct, and that's kind of one of the benefits of being, one of the Kingdom's projects is that our financing is, upfront from our owner. We're also working on how we structure that going forward, but it allows us to have this optionality and to really develop with the Kingdom as it goes forward and works out all the laws and regulations. So it's a great advantage.
I guess to the panel, you're close to the ground, the two of you. What are your thoughts on the law changes? I know there's talk of allowing freehold ownership to non-Saudis, including even non-Muslims, save for Mecca, Medina. Also, you were telling me that you're confident that the owners association laws will be altered and be more aligned with Dubai in what you're doing in current projects, which I've been used that foresight before and been proved wrong.
Yeah, look, I think freehold, it remains to be seen. I think freehold will be a game changer. That's one. And I think on associations, I think we'll see where we end up, right? At the end of the day, the operators and developers and purchasers, there is a certain amount of disalignment and interest because the developer wants to sell and exit. The operator wants to make sure they operate the building for as long as possible and make sure brand standards are maintained as long as possible, and that they can control the service delivery as long as possible. And buyers are concerned about a great place to live and a decent resale value when they exit. So there is some amount of kind of disalignment, but I think regardless of where the laws end up, I think there is a framework that can work until the laws do come into place, which is similar to what we have in Dubai.
Imran, yeah.
As far as the regulation question that Scott, that you asked, I mean, of course, from the publicly reported news updates that we've seen even as early as just 2 weeks ago, that there is a serious consideration being given for non-Saudi nationals buying the real estate as well. And I guess that would be extremely welcome by everybody, all of us, developers, operators. But whether that comes or not, I'm sure it's going to come because it's been reported and the ministries have been working very hard on. But one thing we need to keep in mind that, you know, when we compare any other city, state, or any other country or place within the GCC, Saudi Arabia has got its own cachet, very strong. I mean, you're talking a 35 million population, 65% of it being Saudi nationals. So Saudis are not in minority here. Saudis are in majority. And the income, disposable income, GDP capita, with their buying power, and focused on branded residence part, what they've been buying up overseas, now these brands coming into their own doorstep and the opportunity for them to invest in that, whether for living or investment purpose. Let's not forget that that's a big enough consumer market sitting at the doorstep. Riyadh alone has 8 million population right now, which is going towards 12, 13 million. So it's big markets, but as you said, regulations definitely are coming. Second part of that, I agree with Jaidev that, you know, market is going to evolve. Market is going to adapt itself and everything. But what's most promising from a developer's perspective, at least I can say that because we do this on almost daily basis, the authorities have been so cooperative in working and understanding. Like REGA, we work with Real Estate General Authority, we work with WAFI, we work with many authorities over here who want, one most exciting part over here in the kingdom is that all the authorities are lined up to work together for the kingdom's benefit. So there's no more bureaucracy or there's no more, I'm going to do this, I don't care what that's, so everybody's coming together on a platform and soon you will see that benefiting ultimately the clause and everything else that governs the sales of the branded residences as well.
Do you find that as well, Stephen?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the government authority partnerships have been, in my experience over the last 4 years with KAFD, has been fantastic.
So going to them with these are best practices, worked elsewhere, think about this.
And even the adaptability, like I was talking through, you know, some of the options that we're looking at, very open and flexible, and even taking on board some of these newer ideas, because it's something that's a little bit innovative, changes and shakes up the branded residential from what you see, you know, across the rest of the world, just to help adapt as the kingdom grows.
Saudis had the advantage of being able to see what's worked well, what hasn't worked well in the region, where did things go wrong in the global financial crisis of 2007. And that's, you know, it's reassured operators like us a lot because the point that you're referring to at the beginning of they want to be able to sell up front as a way of being able to finance the hotel. For us as operators, that's also the point at which we have the biggest degree of risk. It's never about the financial risk. The biggest risk for us is the reputational risk. So in Saudi, with deposits being a lot better structured, developers not being able to run away with the money and then leaving a buyer high and dry, for us, that gives us a lot of comfort.
And that is another element, a benefit of the branded residence, that the due diligence that is done on the developer assuring that they have the finance. And you usually won't sign the residential until the hotel is signed.
We
Or
try
ju-
to sign them
Yeah.
together.
Together or
Yeah.
hotel first.
Yep.
Do we have any questions at this point? There's a mic to this gentleman.
Hi. My question basically is to operators. What's your input in the sales and marketing plan for this branded residence? Is it just the owner responsibility, or is it just incorporated efforts between you and the owner? And is there any binding, I would say, agreement between the operator and the lender or buyer of the residence? Sometimes it's a leasehold or freehold. Does it make any difference?
I can take the second one. So in terms of the operator and the purchaser, you mean? In terms of the binding agreement between the operator and the purchaser? I just want to be sure.
Binding agreement
Yeah.
between operator and lender, or what do you call it?
So the way the agreements work typically are, and this is just globally, the operator will contract with the developer, and the developer contracts with the buyers. So we typically don't take on any risk with contracting with individual buyers. There's way too much liability, etc. And frankly, the way we look at it as operators is the developer has use of the brand in order to sell. Our contract is with the developer through a license agreement. And then we have an underlying residential management agreement. So when the project opens, we can operate the building for a 30-year period. But we don't contract directly with the purchasers.
He's
Okay,
understating that they take on no risk.
Yeah.
The contract, they insist on reviewing the sales purchase contract, and it will have a rider at the end making all these exclamations that the operator is not an investor, it's not a developer, it is merely providing the use of the name and the sale, full stop, and that the brand may not be there for the life of your tenure. And it goes on and on and on.
Yeah, sure.
There's
I
no-
mean, now, okay, this is another also question, because this is affecting the sales and marketing plan, because any lender would like to know the relationship between him and the operator, especially about the fees for some. Is there any fixed fees or a la carte fees, or what kind of assessment fees should apply to the because he wants to know before he leases or buy the units.
Were you saying a lender there or a purchaser?
No, let's say leasehold, long-term
Okay,
leasehold.
sorry, 'cause I
Let's say
thought-
20 years, long-term leasehold, yes.
So, because lenders, obviously, banks have got the ability of seeing our contracts. Purchasers, I mean, there are 500 plus branded residential projects around the world now. And just between the two of us, we have about 50% of all the branded residential projects globally, with thousands of units being sold each year, with the disclaimers that Scott was referring to. So purchasers are well aware. What's really, it's why we want to make sure that what's understood in the marketing and sales process, and where do we support. What we're doing is imagine you didn't have us. You're building a high-end luxury or premium residential project. You're going to plan a certain number of dedicated facilities, and you're going to approach brokers and marketing agents to sell. What do we bring to the table? Firstly, on the design side, we bring century plus of hospitality experience, decades plus of branded residential operations experience to really look at the facilities, make them specific, applicable for each market so that the project will sell better, and that we can then create a bespoke service offering for each specific project. The service offering that we would offer, for example, on an SLS or for JDW is going to naturally be different to that we'd offer on a Ritz-Carlton or a Fairmont. So then we'll support throughout the marketing and sales in terms of, we're constantly being asked to give press interviews, we'll mention projects, we both have dedicated websites which feature all of our branded residential projects around the world. We'll be directing buyers onto those. We'll be referring residence owners from our own residence portfolios that we'll be presenting future branded residential projects under our brands with. Very often, people who own a branded residence will be buying another one, either under one of the brands, the same brand, another brand with that operator, or another brand with another operator. We'll also take part in roadshows. If you're doing roadshows in some of our hotels, we'll be able to take part and support through that, and do certain targeted database campaigns to our loyalty programs. So there is quite a bit that we're doing on that side. Yes, buyers don't see the fee structures, but that's normal because they're confidential to us. Yeah. But it's really about how do we deliver the operations. That's what people are buying into, and that's what we really care about, making sure that people understand.
Thank you.
You want to go first?
Sure. Sorry. So yeah, I mean, I completely concur, and I think everything that JD and Daniel have said, you know, from a developer perspective, and to answer your question, maybe more on the marketing side, is all of those things allow us to really add, you know, an expectation to our value and quality proposition. And you know, when you look at a small project or even a large giga project, there's going to be different kinds of communities, different sorts of offerings. So depending on the brand that you're aligning with, depending on all the offering of services and you know the quality level that people will associate with the hotel or the hospitality side, a lot of that helps you tell that story and give that message. It also adds, you know, that level of credibility and reputation on the service side of things, and that, you know, these brands are a match. Because sometimes as developers, you may start off, you know, and not really be known. So having that level or that leverage of a brand helps bring that level of your relationship and the quality and value that you're trying to produce. So it's definitely something that helps on the marketing side.
So just after all that, just one more part is that for the purchaser, it's not a sort of a site of the contract which is necessary really. For purchaser wants to be assured the quality of the brand, who's coming in, what am I buying into. So SPA, which is the sales and purchase agreement, is done jointly. So the brand has the right to approve it, and that's how it's worked together between the developer and the brand. We put together the SPA together. Of course, there's no perpetuity given at the brand. There's an opportunity of reflagging. It reflags later on. But the buyer is assured that the design, functionality, and the reputation of the brand that he or she is buying is solid. And then SPA is there as well to govern all that. A la carte is as you go. I mean, a la carte services, as they suggest, are a la carte. So they are depending, they're not mandatory, they're optional. If you want to get into it, there's a whole menu available, it's put together with the help of operator, and that is presented to the purchaser. So there are very little or very few things that they should really need to know from a fee perspective. Of course, they're paying for the asset, they pay for it, they get their percentages out of it, and then rest of the budget depends on owner association and the service agreement that they have, which is a budget that is put together by all the representative, and then they pay the service fee, for example.
Here, any gentleman there in the middle? There he is. Before the question, you've seen these SPAs that they approve.
He's really hung up on this.
Sounds very rhetorical.
Scott's in a great
I love how they get all the power there. How did that happen?
Believe this. I'm going. I'll use an independent. I'm going to buy a Four Seasons residence, and then they hand me the sales purchase agreement, and it says, "You will be buying a luxury branded residential product." Doesn't say the word Four Seasons. So, I think I'm buying a Ferrari, and I get a Lada.
I will say, though...
There's a big expectation difference there, sorry.
It's still a car.
Actually, I'd argue the Lada breaks down a lot less often than the Ferrari as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Scott's got a point. I think the key thing here is disclosure to the buyers, right? So when a purchaser is buying a residence, it's a branded residence, there's clear disclosure made up front on what they're buying. We insist on all those disclosures. A normal
Except
SPA
for the
is
name
about
of the
this
brand.
big, and once we've looked at it, we want to be able to disclose up front what they're buying, specs, sizes, unit mix, facilities, what they're going to get, how the rental program works, what are the benefits that they're going to get, right? So we disclose all that stuff up front. In mixed-use projects, we've got to be careful, because if we have a hotel, one tower with a hotel and residential component, the contracting parties are a bit different. We operate the hotel, and if for whatever reason we're terminated by the hotel owner on the hotel, the residential will have to deflag because we physically can't operate the residences without the hotel. So there are certain reasons why we have those clauses in these agreements. It protects the
sorry,
buyers.
maybe just to add to that, it's you know, and Scott, for your question directly, like, you know, about the brand that you signed up for, it also has a lot to do with the law. You know, a lot of the homeowners associations, as Daniel mentioned previously, get a lot of power, and sometimes the hotel gets deflagged, but the owners association decides they want to keep the brand. Sometimes, you're voting them out and wanting to change it. So there's a lot of, that's where that horizon of branded residential and the locale that you're in, it's really up to the pre-planning and how you establish everything with the brands up front and make sure that that's very clear and transparent to the buyer.
The gentleman there, please.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you. Hi, Imran. Ali here from Diriyah. My question is actually focused on the future. Wanted to kind of understand, because Jaidev said something that kind of triggered my curiosity. You guys are looking at custom solutions for most of the developments under branded resi at the moment. My question is, what does the future look like? Are we going to go towards more standard products per brand or differentiated? And then there's also the process of services evolving as we continue forward, so tech being integrated better, and et cetera, et cetera. So just if you wouldn't mind just kind of maybe all of the operators there, giving us an idea of what do you guys see yourselves providing in 10 years for branded resi owners?
So we didn't plant this question, but just a disclosure.
It's a total plant from Ali.
Ali is a very innovative mind on his own, so we didn't plant this. So over to you.
Look, maybe I'll take the first part and you can jump in. I think, the sector obviously has grown considerably in the last 10, 15, 20 years. At least over the last 5 to 10 years, what we've seen is a clear growth or continued growth with luxury brands. So for us, Ritz-Carlton, St. Regis, Edition, and W. But we've also seen a huge growth on premium brands. Marriott, Sheraton, Autograph Collection, Westin, where previously that kind of growth wasn't there. So we've seen a lot of growth in premium. There is an argument to be made that upper mid-scale residential, does that drive a premium? Does that work? If the concept is cool and the concept is interesting, and to your point, if it's differentiated, arguably, as a buyer, would I be willing to pay 15, 20, 25% more, potentially, right? So maybe that's an area of growth. Our focus right now is on luxury and premium. I think the other piece we've seen that's really exploded has been standalone residences, where previously it's been hotel and residence projects. Now we're doing a lot of standalone projects. So to give you a sense, our portfolio of global projects is about 120. We have, I think, 20 standalone residence projects. That's about 20%. The pipeline is closer to 40, 45% is standalone projects. And I think we'll see that growth continuing.
I mean, I think that's a testament to the popularity of the product, isn't it?
Popularity of the product, it's tried and tested. The brands are not in it for the short term. I know, the royalty fees are chunky up front in the life cycle of the project. But for us as a hotel company, first and foremost, we're not in the business of doing short-term deals. We're in these projects, we're in these markets for the long term. A couple of terminated residential projects has an impact on our hotel business, right? So we look at these really carefully.
And to add to what JD said, absolutely, we're also, we do projects in the upper mid-scale segment. We've got the Novotel residences in Mecca, which is selling well. The Mama Shelter residences in Dubai, which was the first ever Mama Shelter residences, sold 93% of the 204 units in 4 months. How does it change in terms of aspects of servicing as well, you were saying? So if we go back, say, the 20 years to the beginnings, all of our directors of residences and the residential concierges would have interfaced with the residence owners face-to-face and all over the telephone. Now, a lot of this is done through apps. So you sort of are balancing how do you sort of maintain the luxury level of service whilst at the same time people are time sensitive. There's a lot more demand to be able to interface over an app before you've even arrived so that your residence has been prepared for you with the AC on, the fridge is already full, everything's been pre-planned for you so you arrive in your home and it's there. So we certainly are looking a lot more at that. And standalones, the one point on standalones to also really focus on, because there are a lot of other players who've grown into the branded residential space in the last 5 or 6 years in particular. A lot of fashion brands, automobile brands, and where there's a really big difference between what sort of we do and what they do is that hospitality service, those a la carte services. It's our brands have been above the doors of some of the world's most prestigious, iconic hotels, and we're trusted by owners to manage assets that are worth tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. And owners are trusting us with those brands to manage those individual residential properties and continue to add value to them through the quality of our management. And that's linked to the services. So these standalone projects, it's not about just sticking the brand over the door and then you're going to get the big price premium, because that's very short-termist thinking. The more the market is evolving, the more buyers are actually drilling into the detail of going, what am I getting? How much space is there for me to actually get these services? We can't deliver a la carte services unless we've got enough back of house space to be able to do that. So that's a very important differentiator between the types of brands that you as owners might be looking at.
I mean, that steps into these retail, automotive brands stepping into your sector. I mean, there's something I saw last week in Dubai. I think Damak is doing a fashion TV branded residence. Well, what is the proposition? You're going to have models strutting through the lobbies? Sounds good to me, but it may not be. What are you buying? With a hotel, you kind of know what you're buying.
Yep.
Ferrari, what are you buying? The lift takes your car up to your flat? I don't know.
I think from a developer's perspective, a savvy developer will always be very careful in what kind of brand that it wants to attract. If you want to just bring in for the sake of it, there's no end to it. I mean, somebody was talking about there'll be a Nike hotel, for God's sake. I mean, what are we doing over there? So there is a limit to which a good developer, sensible, savvy developer will go to. I mean, there are some very respected names and they're coming up in the marketplace quite a lot, but not everything. I mean, Maybach doesn't become a hotel, not that any other brand, but there are brands successful. Armani is one. Yeah. Giorgio Armani has done a great job. You now have got news coming into the media, which is reported already, which is Dolce & Gabbana coming into the frame as well. Some dabbled into it, didn't work out. I mean, for some it will, but then there are only so many fashion brands.
Well, you've got Bulgari, don't you? And then
Bulgari has been an incredible success. I mean, recently Dubai Holding launched in November, and the Bulgari residence sold for 410 million dirhams. If that's not a testament to successful,
right brand.
The right brand, then nothing is, right?
Yeah, it really goes back to that value and quality offering. And some of those brands, they have sort of started even in their own HQs looking at how can they develop that service component, because they've learned that the hospitality guys, there's a reason why 90% of the branded residential worldwide has some sort of a link to a hospitality group. But the 10% that's been linked to a Fendi, Dolce & Gabbana, Bulgari, that's starting to encroach, but really only with a very few limited number of brands that have started actually looking at the service to be able to provide that with the developer. Because the last thing we want is to have to stay in operations after we've sold, or then it goes to a homeowners association and everything, if you mentioned Scott, kind of goes the wrong way.
Any further questions? Let's see. Yes, you can go again.
Sorry, it's just quick. From an investor or developer perspective, I would go for more leasehold than freehold, considering the terminal value of the project. So would this make any difference or on your fees, on operator fees? Would they vary based on lease or freehold? Because we know if it's freehold, would generate much more than leasehold for you.
You mean a long-term leasehold?
Yeah, long-term lease. I'm talking about,
years?
But would this vary? I mean, would this make any impact on your fees, or is it the same for you?
I mean, it depends on how long. If it's a true 99-year leasehold, we'd view that as freehold. Yeah. But if it's a 20, 25-year, yeah, no, we wouldn't do that as a branded residence, for example. So, for example, I mean, for us, it would need to be as close to freehold as possible, or a true long-term leasehold. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if you end up where the leasehold is for
We're
less...
talking about mixed-use projects. It's a hotel and residence. So definitely we cannot make a residence with different brand. It has to be the same brand. So that's it's just not a standalone residence. It's a mixed use.
Right.
Sure. I mean, our fee structure is linked more to the concept, the tiers that we're talking about. Are we talking about a luxury brand, about a premium brand? Because the premium itself, that's going to be generated. That's where, as JD was saying earlier, we get the owners to go and commission market studies from third parties who've got that experience to be able to advise them on what prices they're going to be able to sell for. And we just, our upfront license fee is a percentage of that sales price or the long-term leasehold price. There are some very rare markets in the world where, despite a very short lease, the sales prices that are being achieved are astoundingly high. But generally, yes, if you end up with less than around 50 years, you're not going to be getting anywhere close to what you'd be getting on freehold prices.
And maybe just to answer the part of your question where if the apartments were part of the actual hotel building, like it was a split structure or mixed use, you can still do that as a developer because, as we mentioned earlier, we're not actually naming the brand. We're talking about the level of quality of the hotel, so a luxury 5-star property, which as a developer is what we'd want to maintain in the brand of the hotel, even if there was a name change. So the level of quality that we've sold or done the leasehold on is continuous. And also in the leasehold framework, whether it's in the same building or even in a larger development, the leasehold also for us offers a little bit more control, potentially for a longer duration because we're still the landlord, depending on the law again, the freehold, may give up more power to the homeowners association and then you start to lose control of the community. So it also depends on how the development is being sectored out.
And that's successfully done by one of the brands recently in the kingdom, not in Riyadh, in Jeddah, where the power of brand is such that although they're not branded residences, but the sale ticket price is very, very decent because it happens to be in the same building. So, it works out.
Which doesn't make our friends very happy, but that's another story.
We're out of time. If there's any more questions, we take it. Yes, gentlemen.
This kind of links into your question as well about leaseholds, but it's not so much about, it's primarily freeholds. If somebody is a freehold owner of a branded residence, what kind of restrictions does the operator place on rentals? So if that owner wants to rent it out onto the market and put it on Airbnb, I'm sure that's not going to happen with the high-end luxuries, of course, but what are some of the kind of practical measures that you as an operator ensure that your owner is not able to sort of have a detrimental effect on the brand, but also maximize the sales potential that an owner would like to be able to sell it to an owner that's going to be able to rent it on the market when he's not staying in it or she's not staying in it.
It's worth bearing in mind that the unit owner who might want to go on Airbnb, it's also in the hotel owner's interest to make sure that that can't happen.
Yes.
And that comes back to Scott's point at the beginning of the developer, the owner developer who's in there thinking, I'm going to sell this and get the hell out of Dodge. That's already where, when we sort of are negotiating our contracts, we can sense where we're going to have that issue, because the guy who doesn't want those kind of restrictions isn't that concerned about protecting the performance of the hotel. Those who, you want those restrictions because they'll protect the integrity of the rental program performance and the hotel performance. But do you want to take what kind of things you do?
Just building on Daniel's point, like to your point, I mean, if we provide a ton of restrictions with no solutions, we'll end up with issues, right? So the solution in a mixed use is obviously we offer a rental program where we take on those units into a rental program. The rental program has to be compelling enough where they stay in the rental program and not do it for a couple of years, don't get the returns and go somewhere else, right? So these are the issues that we struggle with on a day-to-day basis when we do these mixed use projects. There is a restriction on Airbnb, on VRBO and OTAs, etc. We try to put in place restrictions on length of stay. So if it's a standalone residence project with no hotel, there typically is a 1-year length of stay restriction. So you can lease it. You can lease it independently, rent it out independently. But where we can control it, we try to limit that to a 1-year rental. What we try to avoid is having the holiday home business in a rental guest in a standalone luxury residence.
But I assume wherever possible, you are going to try to control that kind of process, right?
You put it in the governance bylaws.
Yeah.
And
Bylaws.
that partially depends on the local law, because if you have freehold, you're the kingdom of your own little thing, and people can't tell you what to do. They can take you to court, but they can't, and it depends on the legislation, but or peer pressure.
Yeah, or
But
the owners' association.
The
or
owners
third-party manager,
association, yeah.
which in most cases, would you not seek, the operator then, seek to be that third-party manager? Is that possible? Of course, you need to be there, right?
Yeah.
Managing the
Exactly.
services.
So that's critical to make sure there's no sort of doubt. Whenever we brand our residences, assuming the hotel is managed, we will, certainly Marriott and Accor, we will manage effectively the homeowners association. Whether that is, depending on countries, directly contractually, or whether that is through a back-to-back arrangement with a hotel operator, hotel owner. But effectively, as far as a residence owner is concerned, their unit, their property is managed by the hotel operator.
How do you do that on standalone projects?
Well, they've signed up for that in the SPA. That's why there's such a large component and time spent between the developer and the brand developing the sale and purchase agreement. And it's really to maintain the integrity of not just the one apartment owner that may have it freehold, but the rest of the tower of owners.
You've
Right?
signed up on
you don't
that.
want to dilute the brand.
You've signed up on that. If you want to resell, you're going to use a template sales purchase agreement. You're limited in what you can do. You can say, for sale, my Business Bay Ritz-Carlton residence. That's it. You can't use the label. You can't use the brand. It's all controlled, and you often have to sell through, prestigious agencies, or individually. You can't, Vasi is real estate agent. You can't do that. It has to be, Savills or somebody good. So this comes down to let's conclude. It's a great product. As I started in the win-win-win from the beginning, but there are an awful lot of moving parts in these, and everyone has to be aligned to make it work over the life of the project. And to do that, you have to think about it up front, and you have to really do the documentation. The SPA, the management agreement documents, the license agreement, the governance documents, the owners association documents. And if you don't do that, everybody goes different ways, because the interests and their alignment disperses over time. I'd like to thank the panel. I always beat up on these guys, but they deserve it. And thank
Accor
you,
more than us.
Changezi and Stephen.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to all, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Guys.
Thank you, gentlemen.